Nate Saunders and Laurence Edmondson here at the Circuit of the Americas. Laurence, first sprint race for a little while. Max Verstappen back on top. I mean, we were used to saying that at the start of the season. Bit of drama behind him. I actually thought that was a pretty good race. I know that in the media center, I turned to you about halfway through and said, I didn't think this was very good. As soon as I did, it all kind of kicked off a bit. What stood out to you there? Obviously, Max won, but Lando getting himself in a great position and then maybe getting himself into a less good position at the end. I thought that was quite interesting given what we expect, in the championship fight overall.
Yeah, very interesting race because it is a bit of a reversal of what we've come to expect. Of course, that's Max Verstappen's first victory in Formula One. I know not a full Grand Prix, but first victory since the Spanish Grand Prix in June. Which is
crazy to say, like that long of a gap is mad. Yeah, that really stood out, and it was pretty comfortable as well. It looked like him from the start of the season.
It did, and it looked like the Red Bull was back in a place that he wanted it, because we saw him take pole position for this sprint yesterday, and we thought, well, is that just a super special Max Verstappen lap? Are the tyres going to struggle as they go into the race? Is the balance going to be where he wanted it? But actually, it was all there, and he really did perform on the level he wanted. Now, Lando did everything right in the first corner, in the first couple of corners, to get himself up to second place. But I thought it was very telling that the two Ferraris, which of course battled so much in those first 5 laps, Sainz eventually got ahead of his teammate Leclerc, but their pace was actually matching Verstappen. So if you look at it as a whole, who had the fastest car? Well, arguably Ferrari did, because they did all that fighting early on, taking life out their tyres, yet still they were on a Verstappen-style pace, and then able, of course, for Sainz to get ahead of Norris on the final lap, which, I mean, we talk about sprint races, how sometimes they can be a little underwhelming. To have that kind of drama on the final lap, I thought was really quite fun to watch.
Yeah, and it happened right here, just turn one, both things. I think you're right about Lando. I mean, to start like that, I think was pretty impressive. There's been so much said about Lando Norris in the big moments this season. I know that the sprint maybe isn't the biggest moment it can be, but we kind of saw both sides to Lando Norris maybe today. We saw a really, really aggressive, really, really bolshy start. Obviously very easy for drivers to lock up, but it's one of those moments you can point at with Lando and say, well, maybe moments like that is where he's dropped some of those points this season. What do you think a driver like Lando Norris is going to reflect on that kind of performance? Because ultimately it is a sprint. I'm sure he'll kind of, he'll decompartmentalize some of that. Easy for me to say. But yeah, it seemed like it had kind of both sides of the coin for him, which maybe isn't ideal at this point in the season.
Yeah, but there's no point in him putting pressure on himself. What he's got to do is look at the car, because he can make some changes to the setup now for the rest of the weekend. They're allowed to do that. That's something that changed going into this year with sprint weekends. So if he can find something that allows him to hold on to the tyres a little better, be a little bit more comfortable with the car, I think he can perform much, much better tomorrow in the Grand Prix. So that's the key, I think, for Lando. Not to worry about what happened in that race, those moments. It's more about how can you extract more performance from the car. Because we've seen throughout this year, the McLaren has it. It's got new parts on it this weekend, which the teams say haven't sent them down the wrong route, but clearly it may have changed the balance of the car slightly. So he's just got to look at it. He understands it now. He's had a mini little race to figure out what he needs from it. He's got to sit down with his engineers now and just make sure that car is giving him absolutely everything he wants in the Grand Prix, because, of course, way more points on offer there. So even the 2 points lost in the sprint, he can make them up in the Grand Prix.
It's fascinating, isn't it, at this point in the season? We saw Red Bull have it where they had a dominant package, or what we were calling a dominant package, and then maybe developing themselves into a bit of a corner. Zach Brown was asked about that very thing, wasn't he, yesterday, on Friday. And McLaren, I know it's one race, I know it's, Piastri qualified out of position. I think a lot of attention now turns on to, has McLaren started to make the changes to their car that maybe moves them into a position where they're struggling with it? So I think that's a fascinating thing coming up. Great crowd here today, as always. We've always kind of talked about the sprint, the merits of it just generally. I know that it's not everyone's cup of tea. That was pretty entertaining. Is that one of the best we've seen for a while? It's hard to remember ones that have had that much drama up at the front. We often see some overtakes back, further back. But that, if you take Max out of the equation, it had something going on from about second down to about 7th for most of the event. So what did you make of it overall as a spectacle?
I really think so. I've always said this about sprints. Once you're in a situation where it matters a little bit more, and once we have that tension of the title race going on around it, and of course Max Verstappen getting that first win for such a long time, that all of a sudden builds the interest level and the importance of a sprint race. Okay, it's still just 19 laps around here, but actually I think it worked quite well, because a lot of the drivers were being quite aggressive in that 19 laps. I can guarantee you the 19 laps of the Grand Prix, the first 19 laps, won't be like that, because they'll be thinking about strategy further into the race. There's no need to make some of those overtaking moves. But we saw some fantastic racing around the back end of the circuit. You know, once they get through turn 12 into that section, some brilliant overtaking and some brilliant defending as well, right down to the last lap where Lando Norris managed to stop Charles Leclerc coming past him, and Leclerc wasn't happy about that.
And they nearly came together as well, like Charles into Lando at the end.
Yeah, Leclerc said Lando moved under braking. I felt Lando just positioned his car in the best possible place to keep the position.
I agree.
That's understandable. But that's what we want. We want tight racing like that. You know, we want to see that. And I think having that in a sprint race is fantastic, but it also bodes well for the Grand Prix.
And a shout out to, I mean, I guess I can do this, America's team, Haas. Was it 7th and 8th in the end, that Hülkenberg and Magnussen? And we don't talk about them a lot, but that was really impressive. And for a team like that to come to a race, you know, where they are based, where the team is from, huge moment for them as well. So I think we, you know, should give them a shout out as well, because I can't remember the last time we had both those guys. Hülkenberg, we've got used to being up there. Magnussen joining him was a bit of a rare treat this year as well. So that was great. Quick one on Piastri and Perez. We're in the middle of this championship fight. The teammates are so important. Those two guys actually struggled to make progress through the field today. I know Piastri was coming from further back, but shows you can't afford to qualify badly here, even if you have, you know, a really good car, because there's some really racy cars further down the order. Yeah,
Piastri started further back because he had that deleted lap time in qualifying, and it just shows you how important those small margins can be. You know, we were just talking a few centimeters really that he was over the line in qualifying, therefore had the time deleted. But yeah, certainly Verstappen and Norris will hope their teammates are in a much better position to help them in the race. And I think they will be. You know, it's clear that the performances in both of those cars. With Checo, we're never quite sure. Sometimes we get something good, sometimes we don't. But with Oscar Piastri, I think you can guarantee that he'll be further up the field for the rest of the weekend. Yeah, I think that's a fair thing to say. And yeah, Perez, I mean, every single day it seems to swing around. So we're here at the Circuit of the Americas, absolutely loving it as always. Please keep it here with us for the rest of the US Grand Prix on ESPN.